Right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transformative Leadership webinar. This month, we have our starring guest, Carl Ewing. Carl is a member of the Transformative Leadership Education Board, of course, so we can derive from that he's well experienced in transformative leadership. And it's interesting to know that he's returned to the US after 5.5 years living abroad, including Chile in particular. And he has, since he's been back in the US, he has been looking for and found some venues where he could share about transformative leadership. And this is the main topic of our conversation today, is to try to learn from Carl's experience in sharing transformative leadership in different contexts and what he's been learning from that experience. Hopefully we'll learn what went well, but also perhaps we'll discuss at some point what could improve based on the learning he's been making. So, Carl, welcome. Would you like to perhaps introduce yourself briefly and then get us started on how you learned about transformative leadership in particular?
Sure. Well, as Vahid mentioned, my name is Carl, and I am an architect and also have a lot of experience in construction management. And so that gives you a background as to why I was here and there and everywhere in South America. In about 2001, I think it was 2001, I took 2 courses in Transformative Leadership, which was then called Liderazgo Moral, and which is moral leadership. But it was, the interesting part is that the materials were just photocopies in a few booklets. I still have them around here somewhere, and because the books, the English version hadn't been written yet, hadn't been put together. So that was a wonderful experience. And then I traveled with him a bit after that and finally ended up getting him to an airplane in Albuquerque to where he could fly out to visit his mother. And so we spent a little time in Mexico together, which we both got quite ill. That's a whole nother story. But it was a really good experience, and we were able to share a lot. As Vahid was saying, we returned from Chile in 2016, and I was thinking that the best way to get to know the community and see how I could serve it would be to first check in with because I was interested in working with youth, and I didn't know quite how. So I went to the junior Junior Chamber of Commerce, but there was nobody there. And so I asked the lady across the hall, "Oh, they come once in a while. They're not here very often." So I said, maybe this is not the best place. So I asked her what would be a good place to get to know and work with some young people. And she said, "Why don't you try the Doñana Community College?" And so I went there, and lo and behold, they opened their arms and welcomed me in, and I was able to volunteer in a design class given by a now good friend of mine from Barbados, who was a Rhodes Scholar. She's way over the kids' heads in terms of design and so forth. So I was able to help interpret for the kids because I knew the local, I understand the Latin mentality, because most of the students were from Mexican or Latin American backgrounds. And I was able to help them interpret. And I did that for a few years. I got to know the dean very well, and I proposed to him one time. Well, first he asked me if I would give a course on, it had to be virtual because this was during COVID, on engineering and architecture and all the applications and fields that these young people could get into. So I said, sure. And I started putting the course together and realized that the amount of material that I had would not cover an hour and a half twice a week. So I went back to him and I said, look, I've got this course called Transformative Leadership. And I bought him a book and gave it to him. I said, look this over, and I'd like to offer this on Thursdays and do the engineering and architecture on Tuesday. And he agreed. So that was how that started. But I missed a part, I'm sorry. Also, along with this in 2016 or 17, Sharon and I joined what's called a time bank. And it was a part of an NGO that focused on health equity in the community, a very grassroots kind of organization. And the way they work is when you register, when you sign up, you write out what kind of service you'd like to offer the community, because you exchange services with the membership. And I said, well, I've got this course called Transformative Leadership that I could facilitate. And they said, well, they a couple weeks later called me and asked me to do just that virtually. First with their staff. So I did it with their staff, and then with the community. And we did a total of 3 different courses. And that's another way that, that people might look into to see there's an NGO in town that is based in the community as a grassroots organization, because they may be interested. Now, with that NGO, some of the things that I think that are interesting to think about is that there was such a diversity of people, thoughts, orientations, that I was a bit nonplussed. I wasn't used to that. And because I'm, have my own thinking about things. And I thought it was a great learning experience, but I had to be careful how I addressed people as to their gender. I learned that one real quick. And racial issues came up. I remember one time I mentioned that I believe that humanity was one, and so forth. And boy, did I get a kickback from that. And then they said, no, you've got to say that Black Lives Matter or whatever they were telling me. And so I said, look, the way I explain this and the way I understand it is that, yes, I believe humanity is one. And at times, different segments of humanity need a little special attention because of the problems they're having. And so that resolved the issue with them. Nobody gave me any flack after that. So I think that's something that was very valuable for me to learn. Let's see what other things came up. I find that people's attention span and ability to stay up with the reading and so forth was a little difficult virtually. There was even a blind fellow, so with Joan's help, at that time is pretty primitive compared to what Joan's been doing now. We how would you call it? Transcribed the lessons, the book, and they're still around someplace in my computer, I guess. But we had to adapt to him. There were 1 or 2 that were blind, and that went pretty well. They paid pretty good attention. What we did was that I went and bought a bunch of the books and gave them to the NGO so that the people would have books available to them, and they were loaned to them. And that worked out fairly well. That's an issue that I have with the community college and with first of all, with the community college and the NGO, in that people sometimes don't have the ability to purchase a book, even though they're very economical. So that's something to take into consideration. Do you want to maybe buy a bunch yourself and share them with people? The thing is, I'd rather they have them in their hands and that they belong to them so that they can make notes in the margins. I think that's something I learned. And I thought that the sessions went very well, except for those when these different viewpoints came up. But we worked them out. You know, that was a healthy exercise. It was a very healthy exercise. And I find that one of the people who everybody told me was the most sensitive to her gender issues, she would always tell people, no, Carl just isn't practiced at this, and give him a break, you know. She would say it to them. And so it was great. I thought it was wonderful. Very good experience. Now, another thing that I was asked to do by the dean was the community college, the university here, which is a land grant university, which focuses, their main purpose in the beginning was agriculture. Now they have just about everything. But the community college is a part of the university. It's supported and based with the university. And then I was asked by the dean to do the same thing with an early college high school. And what that is that the students get credit, college credit, for some of the courses they take in their last year or two. So it gives them a little heads up and a advance in their college work. And so that was not a very good experience, in that I found the students extremely distracted on their phones all the time. They allowed them to have their phones in the classroom and texting, and they just weren't paying attention. 2 or 3 of the students did. And what I did there was I gave them 2 questions every week, and they asked them to write a paragraph or 2 about each question from the readings. And they did that, and most of them did it. I had one gal that would sit in the back of the room with a buddy, and they turned their desks around, not facing me, towards the back wall. That's how bad the situation is here. And so what I decided to do is I'd go around the classroom the last 20 minutes of the class and talk to each student to see where they were at, see if they needed anything individually. When I got to her, I said, it had to do with the disintegration issue, disintegration and integration. And I asked a question about disintegration. And I noticed that she was sketching in a sketchbook. And I said, would you rather, instead of writing a paragraph, sketch it for me? And she said, yes, I'll do that. So finding that person's in that situation, I had to find the way each student expressed themselves and tried to adapt their lessons to that. It was interesting. But my question is, are high school students ready, especially in the United States, for such a study? I think a lot of them, I felt, just went right over their head. But what I learned there is we had a Chinese student here that we knew who studied aerospace and mechanical engineering, a double major. And he, of course, was making straight A's. And I asked him to talk to the class once. And he said that in his interviews, because he was getting ready, he was now working for Blue Horizons, which is Jeff Bezos' space program. He's working with them in Texas. And he mentioned to the students that when he was being interviewed, almost more than what courses he had taken, they wanted to know what his leadership experience was. And so I told the students, you see, this is an issue. So what I would recommend when you're approaching a school would be to mention that people are interviewing students or graduates, and one of the things that they're interested in is their capability of interacting with people and the ability to lead. So that's just a sidebar, but I thought that was interesting. I'm trying to think of anything else. Do you have any questions? That might prompt my brain.
No, thank you so much. So you shared about the experience with a college, with a grassroots organization, and with a high school, early college context. I was wondering if perhaps you can give us some details about the college experience. How many students did you have? For how long did the course go? And what types of reactions you got from those college students?
The community college?
Right.
Yeah. It was a semester long, which is about 8 weeks, I think. And we met once a week for the engineering part and once a week for the transformative leadership part. And that experience was a bit more positive. I had video webinars or video conferences once a week with them, but not many students came to those. But those that did, it worked pretty well. 2 or 3 did out of, I think I had 10 or 12 students in that class. And I'll just share a story. One of the students was a grown man. Most of the community college people are either recent high school graduates, or I find there's a population of young adults who are getting their careers started and so forth, or want to change careers. And so this one fellow, he was apparently some sort of a director in a surveying company that did, surveying, engineering surveying. And when the course was over, he wrote me a note, and I think I shared that with Joan early on, that he said he thanked me so much for this class because he realized he had been directing his work in totally an opposite way of what should be done, and it has changed his way that he's working with his people that work for him now. So that was a nice comment to get from a student. Let's see what else. The
Remember perhaps the reactions? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you remember perhaps other reactions from the students when they were discussing the topics of transformative leadership?
Yeah, in some of the especially in the early college, high school, now I had 25 or 30 students in that. 25, I think it was. And Samantha asked a question I'll answer in a minute too. I got interesting comments by people about their experiences with prejudice. This is a very interesting community in that it's 60% Mexican or Central American, and the rest is a mix of Muslims. Even young ladies were in my class with hijabs on, and other folks of all kinds. Also, it's a ranching community, a farming community, so there were kids from those backgrounds. And I was taken by some of the comments that I got upon answering questions that I had posed about their experience as they walk in a store and they get followed, things like that. I had a few African American students too, but one of the ones that was being followed was not. She was Hispanic, but she says every time she goes in a store, they follow her around. to make sure she doesn't steal anything. And, you know, things like that. I don't remember all of them now, but it was pretty interesting, some of those reactions.
Yeah, so it really speaks on the local context and the what the social situation and social context they live in, and
Mm.
that's really interesting. I'm wondering, you mentioned especially for the high school group you were working with, did you use TL materials specifically tailored for youth, or did you use the regular TL book?
Well, what I did is that I took excerpts from the book and put them online for the students to read as their assignment. I didn't do the whole book, just portions that were key to the subject and to the questions I posed. And that I didn't like to do. I was not comfortable with that. I would much rather that they had the books in their hands. Whether or not they would have read anything, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's
At the community college, they did. I could tell.
yeah, and so perhaps it's useful for future audiences to know that there are a version of the materials that have been specifically created and written for youth to use. So
Right,
maybe that would be a different approach from reading the material, the
right,
main which I would understand it for high schoolers might be challenging. So
right.
Samantha's question is, what curriculum or format did you use? Can you tell us a little bit about how you structured your course, probably at the college level, or how did you organize the classes?
Yeah, the college level, I had asked them to buy the book, and they did. And they were supposed to read so much. It was sort of like a book reading, you know, what you do with ABS. And it was structured that way. And then we would discuss, I would ask questions to get the discussion started on our weekly video meetings. And then they also answered questions that I would pose from the book.
Fantastic. So you organized probably following the sequence of the book and going like chapter by
Right,
chapter, and that organized the curriculum.
right.
That
So
makes sense.
that the course would build on the way the book builds on it.
That makes sense. Fantastic. So, could you tell us a little bit more about the time bank organization? I'm curious to
Oh,
know when you work with the staff. So the staff is already, I imagine, used to working with um, the local community. Were there like specific types of questions or topics that were of interest to them or that drew their attention more than others?
boy, they were all over the place. I mean, a lot of the issues of the book, like one of the things that uh, the director said to me, there isn't enough about racism here. Well,
Uh-huh.
I talked to Joan about it, and she knows about that. But I explained that, you know, you can't cover every topic in depth because this really has to do, racism as an issue. It's not necessarily a leadership topic. It could be, but you know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem to me that it was an ill that we have in our society. And yes, it has to be addressed. So we talked about that a bit. And I think it was sufficient. I think people were happy after that incident I told you about
Right.
happened. And what else? Um, I think that the um, mental models were interesting to people. I think it struck a chord with a lot of people. I meant to tell you that when we met with the membership, a county commissioner took the course. And in subsequent discussions with him afterwards, I said, what about this in government? And he said, well, they need it. And I've asked him, well, how would you apply it? Can we do this? And I have never heard back from him on that question. I think it's probably not easy for him to commit to doing something like that.
Yeah, and it's probably some aspects might be challenging, I can imagine.
I have
Uh,
since written to the NGO because the director is not there anymore, and asked them if they would be interested in the leadership program, but I haven't heard back from them. So I'm going to have to find out where their office is now and go visit with them, I think.
so your interaction was it completely virtual with them?
Yes,
Ah,
yes,
interesting.
except for arranging for things. And I met with the director often, but with the class, it was virtual. And
Interesting.
that was with the staff was 5 or 6 people. And then with the membership, it was probably, it varied in the 2 courses I did with them of 25 to 30, 35, something like that. They have a membership of 300 or 400.
Yep. So it sounds as though there could be more courses offered that would make sense. Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
Samantha asked about, yeah. Um, One of the students especially who was he was a member of the staff at the time. He comes from a Hispanic background, Spanish speaking, and his father-in-law is a minister of a Spanish-only church near here. And I had thought that they might be interested in this because this young fellow told me that when his father-in-law asked him to do a sermon or something, he would bring these ideas up in the sermon. And it was somewhat controversial. He saw a lot of eyebrows going up. But I said, if you want, I'd be glad to co-tutor with you this in Spanish. And but he never was able to get it together. And I've been in touch with him since, but he hasn't shown renewed interest in that. He may have proposed it to his father-in-law and not gotten a positive response. He told me out front that he got, some not the best feedback from when he posed some of these ideas on the congregation.
I can imagine it's out of the ordinary, at least.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so John has a practical question in terms of organizing your course. Did you use any kind of forum, or did you only interact through the video conferences? Was there any perhaps email back and through when you were giving courses?
There might have been some, but not much. It was mainly done through the courses and at the high school, I was able to meet with them in person. So I dealt with all that. We discussed things there. There were only 3 or 4 students that even responded to my queries about things. I'd throw out a question, try to start a discussion. There were only 3 or 4 that were really interested. It might have been me. I'm probably not the best teacher.
I can imagine that most high school teachers around the world probably would say that engaging with high school students takes some serious effort. So
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
probably not an exception. So perhaps, so we've looked at, you've had the chance to share about those 3 different scenarios and contexts you were working with. I was wondering is around, learning from your experience, what do you think you would change or in future initiatives you might take in your local community based on what you've learned? Do you have thoughts on what could make those types of initiatives better? And yeah, perhaps what would you change in terms of organizing and going through that work?
Yeah, I think in the context of the community college, I would definitely require the purchase of the book. Either that or make sure the library had the book, which I had discussed with them. And I think that would be possible, especially if the library had it for students who couldn't afford it. But I prefer that they have the book physically so they can make notes in it and so forth. At the NGO level, the same thing. We had the library of books that I bought and gave to the NGO, and they loaned them out. But I think that it's better, they didn't feel like making notes in the margins and so forth. I think it's better if they feel it's a personal thing to them.
Right. The note-taking aspect sounds perhaps like a tangent, but actually it really makes the material personal. And for people, usually it's easier to reread their notes and gather what they were thinking about when they went through the text. So that I agree that it is very useful in that sense. Absolutely. Now Samantha is asking, did you prepare a poster or a flyer to advertise the courses when you're offering them? How did
No.
the promotion work?
Well, the promotion the community college did, it was in their catalog. And the high school, I don't know how they did that. Probably it was a course offered, like the same as a community college. And the room was full. It was a full room, classroom. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's a
So
nice facility. It's a very nice facility.
I can imagine that the institution offers the course, people sign up for it, and then start participating. Okay, that
Right.
works.
Right.
That makes sense.
That answer your question, Samantha?
Yeah, no, I was just curious as to what you're selling. What was the main message you were trying to pitch, or how did you sell it? Something.
Right. And with the NGO, of course, it was promoted by them. They promoted it, which was nice. I didn't have to do much.
Well, except offering the course, which can be some work, yeah. I was wondering if perhaps you have. So Samantha is asking if there were formal credentials or certificates offered.
At the high school, I printed out certificates and distributed them to the students at the end of the course. With the college, of course, they got credit. I didn't give them a certificate or anything, just credit for their tour there.
Right. And it would make sense that the institutions would be the one giving credits,
Right.
especially at a college level. And I can imagine high school youth having a certificate of any kind helps build up their curriculum. So that would
I
work.
was a little nervous about doing that, but they got distributed and nobody said anything as far as I know.
And the very least you can do is certify that they were there for the duration, and that's a certificate of participation. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
So perhaps, Carl, you've been participating with our webinars when Enid shared her experiences at the grassroots level, Aruna when she was talking about her arts and connecting arts with transformative leadership. I was wondering if perhaps you have reflections on how these other people that have presented in the previous webinars, how do those experiences connect to your experience working in New Mexico? And
yeah.
sharing transformative leadership around New Mexico, yeah.
Yeah. They're different because I was using it in a school setting in two of the cases, and the other with the NGO, and so they're very different. Now the NGO is probably somewhat similar, and now that COVID's over, I'd like to explore that again. So I'm going to see what doors open with them or with the community college, because I want to do an in-person course there if they'll have me. I mentioned it to the dean, but he is now retired. And so he's just writing grants for them. And I'm going to have to go talk to whoever's in charge again and take them a book.
Yeah. Best of luck with that, and please do share again when that gets started or in whichever direction that moves. So perhaps another question is, has any particular concept or idea from transformative leadership been of particular resonance and importance for you? Do you have like any favorite topics within transformative leadership that really speak to you and that you're engaged with?
Yeah, I think that the conceptual framework is extremely important. I think that trying to live by those, of course, one adds their own to those things from their own backgrounds. But I believe that that's a very important element from the book, is trying to live the concepts that are shared and try and understand them and exercise them, because sometimes you don't really know profoundly what a particular capability is until you do it, try it, and learn from it. I wanted to share with you my experience in the construction field, which is a very top-down field. And I mean in an extreme way. It's whatever the boss says, and there's no discussion. I was even told once that consultation doesn't apply to construction.
That's interesting. Yeah. So that's from your professional experience working on large projects, right?
Right.
So please explain what ideas from transformative leadership were useful there, and how did you apply them?
Well, in Chile, I found Chile a very, very interesting society. I found people extremely open, very inquisitive, and willing to learn. And so I was much fascinated by that. But during construction, I applied my previously learned, I won't call them skills, but awarenesses of other people's needs in construction. I applied it. I started learning it when I was living in Argentina. I lived there for 9 years, and I was in construction a lot there, and had to head up construction crews in large projects. And I started learning from the workers. I'd see the way they solve problems, and I was amazed. I mean, just genius solutions. So I would mention it to them, and this is where I started getting flack. I would mention it and admire their skill and tell them, that's a very valuable skill, and you could work with that and use it in other ways. And they really like to hear that. It encouraged them. And that was just a basic beginning of me learning about this. I had not taken the course yet. I didn't even know about it. But in Chile, due to the openness of the society and so forth, I found that in going around, I was in charge of doing a lot of making sure things were going well and so forth. Not only paperwork, but I would go up out on the site and walk around and see what everybody was doing and make comments if necessary. But I would always praise good work, which I was told you never do that. And I would say, no, I'm serious. I mean, in a big time. People thought I was nuts, and I got criticized often for it. But I didn't care, because I knew that I was building a relationship with the people I worked with day in and day out. And they need encouragement, just like I do. We all need encouragement. And so I remember I'd give them nicknames. One guy was painting a ceiling in the reception center at the project I was working at. And so I named him Michelangelo. He loved that. And, it just develops a family relationship. another guy was patching. I don't, if you've been to that particular project in Chile, it's the buildings are all concrete exteriors, unplastered. They're not, they're finished in board form finish. And there were a lot of little places that had to be patched. And this guy they brought there who patched the concrete, you couldn't tell where the patches were. The guy was so good. I mean, so I said, boy, you should be honored with a trophy for what the work you can do, you know. But all these little interactions, I could tell you dozens of stories. But what it did there was provide, if I needed something done that may have been a little bit out of their scope, they'd do it for me without question. They would step up to the plate and do it. And I remember we were having trouble with the concrete cracking in a floor. And I kept saying, well, got to tear it up. You know, something's happening. And they'd do it, no question, and do it again until we got it the way we wanted. And there were lots of issues that came up that I needed help with. And they'd step up to the plate and take care of it for me without asking any questions or you know, acting, oh, here he goes again, you know.
It's so interesting to hear that because, of course, we know that encouragement is one of the specific capabilities of transformative leadership. And it's part of the process of improving relationships, which you highlighted again, and building up relationships. But it's also about becoming able in oneself to see the good in the persons around us, and then becoming able to better communicate those positive things, which I think we can all agree the world needs more of, lots more of. And
Well,
so it's interesting to hear that in the context you were in, which is highly divided by class and hierarchies, that proved effective and worked so well for you and for that project you were working on.
Yeah, yeah. There was even a big soccer match, or football as it's called in Latin America. And Chile was playing against Spain. And so we went to the dining hall. We had erected a temporary dining hall for the workers. And we set up a projector and a screen, and we all just took some time and watched the soccer match. And it was as good as being there in the stadium itself. I'll never forget that. And Chile won. And at that time, Spain was the reigning world champion, and Chile beat them. So it was fun.
Yeah, and of course, in Latin America, you have to suspend work. This is during an important soccer game. This is absolutely part of social norms.
Right. But that whole thing developed a very, very family-like environment for the most part among the workers. Just little things that told them you cared about them, that you understood their needs. Absolutely. Which are parts of, you know, the capabilities that we all learn.
Right, and this has a transformative effect because people are in the process of developing capabilities, interacting with one another around those capabilities, and that helps build up relationship, and eventually that builds a community. So, Samantha asked if there were trade unions in the building industry, and did you have to deal with any of that?
Not really, Samantha. I was unaware of any direct unions other than the laws of the state. Like, I remember the only injury, the only one that I'm aware of that happened in Chile was we were moving a big concrete culvert, and this one guy had this finger in the wrong place and got it smashed. And it just broke the little end of his tip of his finger. And boy, the health people came out from the state and from Chile, you know, the official, they came out, and man, we had interviews, and it was like somebody had died. But, you know, it was but that's the only interaction I could see were the health regulation laws. And that project was supposedly under OSHA regulations too, which is a thing from the States, which occupational safety and health or
Hazards.
agency or something like that. And they have a series of rules. And that project in Chile was very, very safe. I mean, you had to wear steel-toed boots. You had to wear hard hats all the time. All kinds of regulations. But it was good. It was good. No major accidents.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So we're reaching we're closing in the time limit. I don't know if Joan, perhaps you had a question or a comment you wanted to make on Carl's presentation. And Samantha, if you want to join in and comment on what your thoughts are, you're welcome to.
What I wanted to know, Carol, so who were the people who were against your being so encouraging with the workers?
The overall project, I hate to name, I'm not going to name anybody.
Oh,
but
I don't
the
want to
overall
name
project manager, and then mainly him, and then some of the heads of the other crews that were working there also. Like we had a concrete subcontractor. He never said anything to me, but I think one of his people did. And the fellow I was working with, there were two of us there. We were both managing the day-to-day, project construction. I don't think he ever mentioned anything to me, although I hate to classify people.
No, I just wanted to know if,
Yeah.
the success you had with encouraging them and the positive attitude with which the workers responded to you, like did that have any influence on these people who thought that you had to be top down?
I don't know. They
Okay.
only would get after me once or twice, and then they left it alone because they knew I wasn't going to change. I think they got frustrated by it because they thought I was getting too buddy-buddy with the workers. I do remember one case that I got called on that, which you have to be careful, but I still believe in praising good work and acknowledging people as creative beings, as their the essential oneness and beauty that they have as an individual and what they have to offer to the world and how they apply it.
Thank you.
Samantha, please.
Sorry, anyway, just a quick question. Obviously, you were part of the time bank and you contributed. But I'm just very curious as to what you spend your credit on.
I never have. I just let it accumulate. I have never. Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Interact.
I just haven't been active with them ever since the course ended because I got busy with the colleges and oh my gosh. And I haven't been too active with them. And then I was good friends with the director and I became good friends with her. And she was a very interesting lady. And she changed and left. And so I kind of lost touch with that organization. I tried to help them with principles of organization too, to help them organize. And
well, that's what
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking because, the principle of any organization being about unity, capacity building, and the function. But what their function, as I understand it, a time bank is very much about community building by having the excuse to reciprocate time on services that are out of the monetary traditional economy. So it'd be good actually, even if you don't need to, but the whole point is to want to say to them, look, I earned
Right.
these credits. What can I do more so that you can then help it work? You know what I mean? By
Yeah, I
taking
should have
something
probably.
out. And
So that's
yeah,
something I should probably look into if I get back involved with them.
right.
It's all listed online. I can go look up my credits and what people are offering. And it's an
Exactly.
interesting group.
It's a haircut.
Yeah, I could do that. That would be a good idea, actually. Thank you.
I'm just joking. But yeah,
What's
it's just
left
nice
of
to
it?
see.
What's left of it, huh?
Cool.
Okay, wonderful. So I think we can stop the recording here at least. Thank you so much, Carl, for sharing and yeah, helping us learn about different ways to access and work with our local context and communities. And it's so interesting also for me to see how you manage both a formal educational context and make TL work there, and also the idea of the NGO, the nonprofit time bank. That's so interesting. I'm going to look for more possibilities in my community to see if there's anything similar that where I could bring some concrete application of transformative leadership. So thanks again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's apparently an international organization, this time bank business. And whether there is one in Argentina, I don't know.
Okay. I'll check on that. Thank you so much, and I'll stop the recording here.